Have you been looking to do some work on your bow at home, but you don't have a bow press? Well, you need to check out this video. I'm going to be walking you through how to build this DIY bow press for around 40 bucks. Super quick, super easy. That way you can do maintenance and things on your bow, and you don't have to take it to a bow tech and spend tons and tons of cash every single time you need to make some tweaks on your bow. You're going to be able to do it right from your house without having to worry about going out and doing all that stuff. And it's going to give you a little bit of pride in taking care of your own bow and learn how to do some maintenance stuff on it as well. If you like this video, please stick around, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into this video. All right, so you see the bow press sitting here, and essentially all this is a pipe clamp with the black pipe. You have to buy all this kind of separate, and then it's just some pieces of 2x4 and a piece of 2x2 here on the bottom to make the base so it's more stable. And guys, the basis of this bow press is the clamp itself. So that is probably the most expensive part, is buying the pipe and the clamp, but we're gonna break it down, show you how much things cost. But super quick and easy is you put it in here this way, and then you would tighten it down. But that's essentially how this works. And I know some of you guys are thinking, okay, well that's gonna be kind of a pain if you're working on a serving or something like that. Well, as you just saw, I had it flipped upside down and had it clamped in a different way. But yeah, if you were going to be changing strings or cables on this thing, you know, the bow is flipped upside down. Typically, you would have it the other way, but it doesn't make it that hard to do, because once this is compressed, and I'm going to go through showing you how I set up the ends and cut the slots and things for the cams and the limb pockets, but you still have access to the string and the cables to get those out. So it's not going to be a big issue. One thing you want to keep in mind is, you know, based on whatever bow you're using, you know, you're probably going to have to make some tweaks and things, because the limb pockets are going to be different that you have to cut out for the ends of the limbs here, and the cams are going to be a little different. So you do have to get a little creative when you're going through building this. All right, guys, let's dive in, show you the materials and some of the prices associated with the materials, so you know exactly what to get if you're looking to make a bow press like this. So the clamp itself is like the whole foundation of this bow press. So all this is a Beasley 1/2 inch pipe clamp. So I bought this Beasley from Home Depot, and it was around 20 bucks for the clamp itself. So what is the clamp? Well, it comes with this piece that threads onto the end of the black pipe, and then you also get this other end piece which slides on the pipe, and it kind of holds itself in place. We don't have this tightened down, guys. That's why it's a little flimsy. And then the black pipe, I bought a 48 inch black pipe. If you go on Home Depot or whatever, type in black pipe, these are gonna come up. But the 1/2 inch refers to the inside diameter of the pipe. The outside is probably just around 3/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less, because I used a 3/4 inch drill bit to make the center hole for the pipe to go through. So I've had no issues with this 1/2 inch, you know, having too much pressure on it or anything like that. We can talk a little bit about some of the specs and things. You know, this is a 70-pound bow, and it ranges from 60 to 70. So what I've done, I've backed off the limb bolts just a little bit, you know, and I backed it down to 60 pounds. So it's going to have the least amount of pressure on the limbs as we can possibly get. I know a lot of newer bows, you know, they'll range from 20 pounds all the way up to 70 pounds. So a lot of adjustment range. So a good tip there would be to lower it all the way down to its lowest setting, so you have the least amount of pressure possible. But even with this, I know a lot of people are hesitant to use a 2x4 just by itself on the end down here, especially when you have to go cut a slot in the back of it. They have reservations thinking it might be a little bit too flimsy, but I'll tell you right now, it's not. All right, let's show you kind of how we made the wood pieces. So I'm going to take this out of the press. So the wood pieces do have the 2x2 on the bottom, and all I did was connect it just by 2 wood screws on the bottom. I drilled 2 pilot holes just so the wood wouldn't split. But essentially how I made this, let the camera focus a little bit, is this right here is where the limb, the end of the limbs are going to sit. So just like that. They're going to sit in there just like that, and we have enough room and clearance underneath that cam. So that's one thing you're going to want to pay attention to, because for us to be able to remove the cables and the string from this, we're going to need to be able to get the string ran out from underneath there. So you're going to have enough clearance. So once again, it's going to be a little different for each type of bow. So you really want to make sure you have these little pockets cut good and the pocket for the cam to be sitting in there. So that's all going to be subjective based on your specific bow. But most of the cams and everything are going to be relatively the same. And this is a solid limb bow. But if we had a split limb bow, it's probably going to be a little bit wider. All we have to do is cut the pockets right here just a little bit wider, and we'd be able to accommodate a split limb bow. But that's kind of how those work. So to cut these notches, all I did was take this wood saw right here and I sawed down on both sides, and then what I did, I took a chisel and kind of chiseled it out there. That way I didn't split the wood or anything, because you really want to be cautious not to split the wood anywhere, because you're going to have to start over. And that's pretty much all I did to make these little bevels here. So Harbor Freight, probably $8 for a saw. You could buy a set of chisels, if you didn't have all that stuff already, but you can get kind of crafty with whatever you have. So I didn't secure this down to the wood or anything. That way we can just remove these if we wanted to. I mean, it's just going to slide off. Yeah, it gets a little annoying it not being completely, clamped down like that. But in reality, I'm probably not going to be using this too often. It's just one of those things that you're going to be using to get by, do those modifications to your bow, put a new string or cable set on, and that's probably it for the year or every 3 years. Who knows? Only you can determine how much you're actually going to use this. But, this beats going to a bow technician and paying a ton of money to get a new cable set, string installed, and all that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put the bow in this press, show you kind of how it operates. So, you can put this either way. One thing that you might want to make note of, if your bow has a setup like this where it does have a limb stop on it, I had to take it off. That way it can sit down in the pocket of this wood. So just make sure, if something's in the way, you take that off before it gets bonded up. And essentially all you do is make sure it goes down in those little pockets. So we're gonna have to back this off just a little bit. I'm gonna slide this end piece down here, making sure that's tight. I'm gonna make sure this is centered. All right, I'm gonna double check, making sure these limbs are sitting in there flush and these are as well. Like I said, we already backed this down to 60 pounds. And then all you do is actuate the clamp here. We're gonna look at the tension on this string. Look at that. You can already see a lot of tension being released on the strings here. Look at that. That right there would probably be enough to even switch out the cables and stuff. All right, look at that. We could go ahead and do all kinds of maintenance on this because the strings are that loose. And with just 2x4s, you don't have to go out and buy, a lot of thick wood, glue it together and do all of that. You could if you had a lot of reservations about this holding up, but I'm telling you, in the real scheme of things, there's not too much pressure applied on these limbs, on the very outside here. It's a 70-pound bow back down to 60. It may have a little bit more than that on the limbs itself. But this is going to hold just fine. This black pipe is super sturdy. You're not going to break this thing. The weak point, if there was a weak point, would be here at the wood. But if you get a good piece of wood that doesn't have a lot of splits or anything like that, or I would say no splits, then you're going to be just fine. So just pick out a good piece of wood and you're going to be, set up really solid. Let me get the camera and show you a little bit closer. All right, so closer view and everything. Look at that. You'd have plenty of room to take your cable set off, take your string off. And there's plenty of clearance there for the cam. You'd be able to slide your string right out. All right, so plenty of tension released here. And I didn't even crank it down all the way. I mean, you could keep going. Look at that. One thing to keep in mind, you know, I wouldn't put too much stress on the limbs. So keep that in mind. You know, you don't want to go past parallel. You know, if your bow has a parallel limb bow already, you know, keep that in mind. So if you think you're going to overstress the limbs, then don't do too much tension. Like this would be plenty to get that string and cable set off. All right, so we showed you how to use the bow press and everything, but how do you get it back down? How do you get the tension off of this? So this is going to be way safer than using a ratchet strap or something like that. I would just strongly suggest against using a ratchet strap set to do any type of bow press stuff. You know, there's a lot of different bow press ideas out there. You know, there's ones where they clip on the end of the limbs and it's got a cable and you tighten it up in the middle. You know, those are kind of hit and miss too, because a lot of times they slide off, you know, and there's a lot of tension and that thing slides off. It's not going to be a good day for anybody. So keep that in mind if you're looking at DIY bow press ideas or buying some cheap bow press off of Amazon. Keep that in mind. I just want to throw that in there real quick. But we're going to show you how to take the bow out of the press. So slowly I'm going to try to back this off. And one thing you can tell, this is angled just a little bit to accommodate the force. But all I'm going to have to do is tap that a little bit because it does bind up a little right there. And I'm just going to back it off just a little bit more. And instead of doing this, you could put grease and stuff on it. Actually, we might go ahead and put some grease on it and show you the differences. All right, so right there, the whole bow is unpressed. You can back it out, and then we're good to go again. There's 60 pounds of tension back on that string, and we're good to go. Simple, it's quick, easy, it's cheap, $40. And you could do this DIY bow press right at home, and probably less than an hour you could get all this stuff set up. And I guess depending on how many tweaks and stuff you had to make to the pockets on these boards, but simple idea right here. All right, so I don't have much grease laying around, but we do have this reel grease, you know, real grease. Now it's for a fishing reel. Let's see if we can use this on here and see if it lubricates it enough to where it's not going to bind up. I think this should do the trick. I'm not putting this everywhere. I'm just going to put it where that block is kind of meeting up with the metal here. So get that on there and get some of that grease rubbed on. All right, let's put the bow back in here and see what it looks like. All right, we got the grease installed on this bar. We'll go ahead and tighten this up. I'm gonna make sure this is centered. So making sure these end pieces are centered, unless you go ahead and secure them down somehow, maybe drill them in, apply some screws, then you're not gonna have to worry about, you know, making sure they're centered. But you know, if you had it one way or the other, it could split the wood potentially. All right, so we got enough force on it. Now let's see if it backs out without having to move it. Oh yeah, that does actually work. Wow. Okay. And loosen it up down here. And there we go. So the grease does work. I was kind of skeptical that the grease probably wouldn't work, but hey, that beats bringing a hammer out and having to hammer on it a little bit to get it back out of there. So it works pretty nice. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video. Hopefully you like this idea of how to take this black pipe and clamp set and make a DIY bow press. Yeah, I see a lot of different types of bow presses out there that people try to make, but this seemed to be the simplest design and probably the most robust. This pipe right here is just super tough. I mean, you're not gonna bend this at all. I mean, you could put an 80-pound bow in here and it's gonna do this no problem. The wood, super cheap, And you know, if you get some good pieces of wood, it's gonna be super strong. If you had reservations about this being strong enough, go with the 4x4. You know, and you know that might put your mind at ease that it's gonna be strong enough. But this works for me. And if you had lower poundage bows, I mean, it's gonna be no problem. And I haven't heard any creaking, cracking, or anything from the wood, so I know it's gonna hold up. I think it's gonna be just fine. You know, there is always that potential that the wood could split or something like that, but that's, you got the potential for anything to happen with just about any bow press. So Beasley pipe clamp here, 20 bucks. The wood probably put in, I don't know, a couple bucks there. It's not much wood. About 20 bucks for the pipe itself. If you're looking for it, it's called black pipe. So around 40, 45 bucks, you can make this bow press pretty easy. So it's gonna get the job done. I know, like I said, the bow is kind of inverted, so it's a little different than most bow presses. I mean, you're not gonna have the ability to tie in peeps and stuff like that as easily, but you can still get the tension off, put the peep in, get it where you want it, and then flip it around, and then you could tie in your peep. So it's not a deal breaker the way this thing is set up. It's still going to be way more functional than a lot of those other DIY bow presses on Amazon, and it's going to get the job done. I think you're just going to have to work a little bit harder to get some of those items installed. But other than that, I mean, for putting new strings and cable sets on, I'd say this is where this type is going to shine. It's super cheap for that. I mean, you're not going to have to go out and spend a lot of money at a technician to get all that stuff done. All right, guys, if you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know if you have any other ideas out there that work better than this, you know, and tell me if you make one of these like I did, you know, did it work for you? And, you know, maybe some other additions and modifications that you made to yours to make it even better. So I've seen them like this before, but they didn't put the base plates on them. So this one's gonna be super stable. It's not gonna rock back and forth. So that's one thing I did to enhance this, but guys, you can be as creative as you want and make a really, really awesome DIY project. So let me know how yours goes. Guys, thanks for watching this video. We'll catch you guys later.